shut that door. I'm just thinking if the other group has their door open, we might be. I can hear them, they can probably. Okay. I did not know that. All right, thank you everybody for coming out this evening. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Kara, are you doing roll call? Okay.
Okay, committee members Baker? Belly? Here. Hoppy? Here. Lennox? Here. Loftus? Here. Lozano? Here. Filiorolo? Here. Ziegler?
Here.
And alternate member Zita?
Oh, we missed Kyle
Oh
somehow.
boy, I walked right past you. I'm so sorry.
All right. And so next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I have a question about the agenda.
Okay.
Normally, we have a motion to move public comment. Or is public comment at the end, or is it at the beginning?
So public comment is at the end of this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, up on the screen.
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay. Motion by Dave. Seconded by Kyle. All in favor? All right. Motion carries. And then we need a, Joe, I'm not seeing a motion to approve the minutes.
Approval of the January 11th Finance Committee minutes.
Okay. Oh, right. Sorry. 4A. Thank you. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting? Motion by Alvita. Seconded by Brooke. All in favor? All right. Motion carries.
All right, good evening, everyone. Again, my name's Brittany Gallistorfer. Work for a small company out of Ann Arbor, Michigan called Bridgeport Consulting, a small but mighty team of 5, and I'm pleased to be your facilitator. What we're here to do tonight, if we can, is finalize your recommendations and agree on next steps. The deadline for this group is not tonight for that recommendation, just to be clear. So if for some reason we cannot reach that recommendation point, we have not missed our deadline. But that is what we hope to achieve tonight, just to be super clear. The way we're going to hope to reach consensus together, we're going to start by kind of recapping where we last left our heroes at the last meeting. Then we'll update one another on where we're at. I imagine some of you have given some thought to the conversations that we had at the last meeting. Maybe your thinking has evolved, either on the ballot measure recommendation and or on some of what we're calling the riders. So we will discuss that. We'll talk them through. We will decide as a group if we want to start discussions around the ballot proposal or if you'd prefer to start with the riders. We could do it either way. Quinn and I talked about this. We kind of went back and forth. Might be nice just to kind of get out of the way the thing we have to vote on, which would be any ballot proposals. And then talk about the riders, or if you feel like it's important to talk about the riders first because they inform your opinion about what you would want to vote on, then we can do it the other way around. And then importantly, we'll talk about next steps. So we need to understand who's doing what in terms of writing the report. I think it would probably also make sense to talk a little bit about who's going to go before City Council to share the recommendation and what that will look like, and then set some milestone dates. We have some proposed dates on the agenda in terms of check-in, when we would have a draft report to the full group for feedback, and when we would finalize that, which ideally is February 15th at our next and final task force meeting. So that is what we hope to accomplish in this 2 hours together.
You said ideally, right?
Ideally, yes.
Ideally.
Yes,
So
that's
It
right.
takes longer than it takes longer.
That's right.
But do keep in mind, Joe, can you remind us of the deadline that City Council has in order to make a decision and have something on the ballot for this year? Because that is a firm deadline.
Yeah, through the chair, March and April would be the two. We want to deliver the recommendation in March so they can come back in April with a resolution. And that will trigger our action in May with the filing for the ballot.
So would you say our deadline's March 1st, Joe?
Or which deadline are we talking about?
To get a recommendation
report?
to city council, which I would expect means having a report as well.
Yes, if it's by March 5th, it would have to be put into the agenda.
Okay, March 5th. Good. I see. So March 1st.
Oh, I already did that, Kate. It's on the March 11th agenda, so it has to be on March 5th.
All right, we're all going to check each other's math tonight, all right? Team effort. Does it need a public hearing? No. All right, excellent. All good questions. All right. So Quinn has had some conversations with you all. Quinn, would you like to start off kind of by recapping where we last left our heroes?
I would like to hear from the group if they want to start with riders or millage, because then I could do 2 mini recaps rather than 1 big recap.
Gotcha. What is the group's preference? Jeffrey, you look like you have an opinion.
Well, I think that through the chair, I think they're same thing in a lot of, if not all the cases.
It kind of is a comprehensive package in your mind. Go ahead, David. Do you have an opinion?
So then why don't we start with the millage?
Okay.
You want to start
Sure.
with
Yep.
that?
Yeah.
Is that what everyone else wants to start with?
Okay.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Yep. Good. Thank you, David. Sometimes it's helpful
And to
just
remind
have a
everybody, the
decision.
current millage rate is at 11, right?
That's
From
right.
Joe's email, is that right?
Through the chair, the operating millage is 11.63, and then the current voter-approved millage is about 4.3. That 4.3 expires next December.
Okay.
Thank you.
Full 5 digits is in the email.
All right, good.
So then anything above the 15, whatever would be, or between 11 and 20 is the maximum.
That'd be correct. Correct.
Yeah, so we're currently, we can round that up to 16 is where we're currently at, just for ease of conversation, recognizing that the actual number is more nuanced. But where we're at right now is 16 mils, and that includes the 4.3 mils currently voter approved.
Which is a prior Headley over.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. And so the conversation that we had last Thursday, and the conversation that I have had with many of you over this past week, sounds like many of you remain on asking voters to go, if we're starting at the 11.6, it would be an additional, gosh, I'm doing math on the fly, 8 and some change. That would bring us up to the 20 mil, the 20 mil maximum. So that sounds like what most of you have recommended. I will say that you have had time to think about it. You may have changed your mind. You are not beholden to anything that you said in this last meeting. You are not beholden to anything that you said to me. The mark of intelligent people is that when you get new information, you make new choices. So it's okay if you haven't changed your mind, and it's okay if you have. So Joe, you had sent an email saying that if the recommendation of this committee was to go up to 20 mils, we do not need to make any recommendation around the time frame. Do you want to talk a bit about that and expand on that maybe?
Sure. Yeah, and I did confirm that with the city attorney. So if there's a movement to go towards 20 mils, that would be viewed as just a Headley override that's a reset. You'd reset to the charter allowed 20 mils. And then that's just it. That you just have done just that. You've just reset the millage to 20 instead of 11. And it just starts rolling back again.
Right, so it's not
So the
going
clock
to stay.
resets.
Yeah, it's not going to stay at 20 forever.
No,
is
it
an
starts
important,
rolling back
an important
immediately.
caveat.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to need to take a vote on that. If that continues to be what people want to do, it will be a yes/no vote on that topic. But one thing that we also need to include in that vote is special purpose millages. Like I said, I have had an opportunity to talk with lots of you over the last week or so, and I will say it is all over the board. Brooke, I heard what you said last week, that you would prefer to see the additional 4 mills over and above what we're currently at put into the general fund to allow maximum flexibility. And I heard what you said last time about, a lot of concern about putting too many things on the ballot and not wanting to really just be an overwhelming ballot experience for residents. And then, Kate, I also heard what you said about as we are telling residents about what is important and why we're recommending this, it's nice to tie that to a new building, a new service, something that they can see over and above what we're currently doing. So my understanding around special purpose millages is we really have kind of 3 options, and some shades within those. But yeah,
Can I stop you for 1 second? Just to clarify for everybody, you're saying up into 20, you're saying that there's, most people want, say, special purpose millage, you're saying allocate specifically what it's used for.
right. So it's not additional over and above the 20. It would be as part of the 20. This committee could recommend to reserve a mill for facilities, a mill for public safety, a mill for parks and rec, or any sort of combination of those things.
So then right now we're at 16, and then we're investing to go up to 20, but in the increase of 20, we would have to, you're saying a special purpose millage would allocate 9 between the 11 and the 20, or between the 16 and the 20? Where we're currently at.
So if we said that we want to allocate 1 mill for facilities, so essentially the voters would have to approve the 8 mills, so going up from the 11.6 to the 20, 8 and some change, I'm rounding here. 4 of those mills would be general fund, because we need those in the general fund for operating purposes.
But we're asking to go from 11 to 20, or from 16 to 20?
Maybe I can step in. I think we haven't decided is the answer. So if it would be helpful to first have that conversation, then perhaps we have the special
just wanted to
purpose. Go
understand.
ahead. Yep, go ahead, Greg.
Through the chair. So for clarity, the 4.3 ends at the end of 2025. So that's going to be gone. If you want to vote that in, that's brand new. It's not, we talk about a renewal, but really it's not. You have to start over again. So you could do 4.3, you could do 6.8, you could do 2.1.
And you could dedicate some or all of it.
And you could, yes, and out of the 6.8, let's say you could say 2 of those 6.8, you're going to allocate toward facilities.
This is what we're not asking for, if we were to be asking for 4.3, that would be keeping at the same level that we are today.
Correct. So
We would have to be going and asking for an additional 9 mills on top of the 11, because the 11 is where we're starting, and the 4.3 is going away. So essentially, we're going to be asking the community for 9 mills, and then of that 9 mills, the special purpose, I guess, is a question to the committee to say, do we want to restrict the use of those funds for these particular items? I know, Kate, you said Parks and Rec, you would love to have one for Parks and Rec. We've talked about public safety, and then the other mill that we spoke about was facilities.
That's right.
But essentially, I just wanted to make sure that I understood correctly that on the ballot, it's going to be saying to go from 11 to 20. And that's what the majority of the group wants to do, is to go, do we need to decide that first and then decide the allocation?
So unless somebody would like to say that they have changed their mind, at this point, I believe that that is the plan.
So, Brittany, is it okay to go around and ask everybody if they've changed their mind and to say where they are with that piece?
Sure.
First?
Yes, and let me just kind of remind us where we were. Go ahead, Joe.
Before, just real quick, I want to, through the chair, make a point on special purpose. Every special purpose millage does roll back, so that facilities, for one, just to be clear, that rolls back immediately as well. So every one of them rolls back, and every one requires a charter amendment. So if you do 3 special purposes, that's 3 charter amendments along with those. So now that's 3 charter amendments, 3 special purposes, plus the head, that's 7 ballot questions.
Go ahead. Hold on, Kimberly. Sorry.
I also want to point out too that because of what Joe just said about special purpose millages requiring charter amendments, it is possible that the special purpose millage would pass and the charter amendment would fail. So the special purpose millage then wouldn't pass.
So I want to go back to kind of finishing my thought around deciding special purpose millages, because we're all over the place. So some people have said no special purpose. We want maximum flexibility. Other folks have said that they do want a special purpose millage. And I heard at least one of the 3 options that we've considered from at least one person. So like I said, all over the place. And then there is a medium, which, Joe, was the council resolution. Can you just define for us what a council resolution would be around allocating those mills? I noticed that your brow is furrowed, so it's possible I have completely misunderstood.
No, I'm trying to go back to my memo. I think what I was saying is, pending your recommendation, one of your recommendations or riders would be to ask council to adopt a resolution that is an intentional document. So resolutions aren't binding, but they're public records of intention, and the record is important for elected office. So council, in this case, if you had a recommendation and said, if there were 8 mills on the ballot, we'd recommend you sustain the existing 4 for operating and put 4 for facilities. And that's just my example. And the resolution, if they agreed with that, could be, that's their intention. And then so in that resolution, you could ask the city manager to provide a report to prove that spending in the resolution. So that was just an example I was given.
Great, thank you. And so,
Hold on. Does David have a question?
And as a reminder, this is just a recommendation to council. So if we were to go to council and say, we want to go, the committee has decided and spoken with our community and decided that everyone wants to increase from 11 to 20, and we want these 7 restrictions, the city council could look at that and say, gosh, this is not going to go anywhere because of all these restrictions, and they could take parts of what we decide to suggest to them. Isn't that right, Greg? Okay, thank you.
So that's where we're at. I am happy if we want to go around the table and see if people
Before we do that, if I could just remind us where we were last as a group, because sometimes it can be hard just to jump right into a conversation. And I want to encourage you if you're feeling, yes, you were kings and queens. I simplified it, but we do remember the nuance. But the part of why I wanted to remind you is to remind you how close you all are to a common recommendation. There are differences, and there are important differences, and we'll talk through those today. But I think the difference, if I looked at the math right, is within $25 a month. I'm not saying that's a small amount of money to a resident at all. I'm just pointing out.
$25 for who? The 65%?
Yeah, the 65%.
The 65% people who
yeah,
have,
the
okay.
63%.
And
right.
most people have said that that's not a big deal.
Right. Let's not parse words. I'm not saying if it's a big deal or not. That's for each person to decide for themselves.
Sure.
All I'm just pointing out is you're close. You're closer to one another than you may feel. And And there was already some compromising that took place at the last meeting. So there were some folks who wanted a full plus some. We'll remember Kate had some great ideas. Go big or go home. There were some folks who wanted just a full. There were some folks who wanted a partial. When I say partial, I mean, Kyle, I included you in that, like somewhere between what we have now. And there were some folks like David who wanted a partial and something. And as Quinn pointed out, thank you, that was helpful to remind us that the majority of folks felt like a full. Now, a full with caveats, a full without caveats, riders, not riders, yes. This was where the majority was, but that was, it isn't the extremes. I just wanted to point that out for folks. There are some folks who feel that more is merited, and there are some folks who feel that less is merited. So I wonder, I guess the way I would encourage starting, Brooke, it looks like you have something to add. Please. We should all speak tonight.
Through the chair. To continue with what you were saying, I have been on the end of the spectrum of more is better, whether it's more or just more. So I want to get to 20 because I don't think that 11 plus 4 is enough to get us what the community has said through the Cobalt survey is important to them, which is the amenities and the great things that Ferndale has. So that's where I want to get up to the 20 because I don't want to just keep it as is. I would like more. The 60-some% of people, the amount of people who gave the co-op, that's all, variable and not ideal. It's not 100%. Everybody doesn't have a voice on that. Understood. And the reason I chose to do just a full without any special purpose millages, I think riders are great. I think recommendations from us is great. But I also think that we just had a city council election. The current members of city council were elected in for personal reasons from every member of the community who voted. And I choose to trust their voting, their discretion, their banter, their discussions to not place that I want 1 mil for this, 2 mils for that, 3 mils for that. We can recommend, we would like you to set aside this for this with this caveat of a reporting whatever. We think it'd be great if you set aside this for this because of the Cobalt survey, the whatever. I would also like to, I'm a saver, so I would like to keep it in the general fund to not be, stifled if something big world event would happen again that we've learned recently enough could cause everything to go into chaos. So for me, the full 20 without voted on stipulations, ballot initiatives, charter amendments, special purpose millages puts me on that kind of, number 2 sort of thing. I think that puts me on one side of the spectrum, whereas there are others who want some more voter ballot sort of talk about where those mills are going, whether it's 5, 10, 20, whatever.
Thank you, Brooke. Go ahead, Dave.
9 though. It's 9.
Get up to the 9 total to get to 20, but if you want a partial, that wouldn't get you to the 20. So that would be less.
And just to be clear, it's 8.4. if we're slicing hairs, it's
So much,
8.4.
Quinn. Thank you so much.
All right, so I want to invite in Quinn. Could I invite in Simrit? Because he wasn't at the last meeting, and I think we're all going to be interested to hear where your thinking's at, Simrit.
So I'm at the 2.
I'm sorry, you're at the 2? The full.
2 level. I don't want to. I don't know. I just think about my own personal life and what's happened in the past 10 years. I don't want to restrict anything, and I also don't want to just box ourselves in. If, say, like in 5 years from now, citizens want something to be done differently. I think it'd be, from my perspective, I'd rather have community feedback done later on through city council meetings determine how funds are allocated exactly. That's where I'm at. I think going from the level we are to full would improve at least my quality of life here in Ferndale. But adding on that facilities bond, not sure if it would. I think it'd definitely be helpful in terms of like getting buildings and things like that, but I think it's just a little bit too much for me personally.
Fair enough. So my next question, thank you for sharing that, is has anybody's thinking evolved since our last meeting? Is there anybody who is thinking about things differently? Yeah, Kate.
Through the chair, yes, I had like a list of 5 things, right? So we were talking specifically about some big things that we've deferred for years and years. I mean, we haven't had a reasonable community center in my lifetime. We kept having temporary fixes and solutions for our fire stations because we kept hoping and inching toward consolidation agreements and other things that we thought were just coming right down the road and didn't come together. So more than just the facilities bond for a Martin Road Park structure or a police and fire station, I think I had a number of other things that I see as community priorities. Whether those have to happen at the same time, I think is where my thinking has changed in talking with a couple people, including Quinn. The priority is our general operating. The facilities, particularly something like a major improvement to our public safety facilities, that's something I don't think we've studied enough to get specific language to get a bond on the ballot in a couple months anyway. So perhaps that comes a little bit further down the road. So just to put that out there, that timing and thinking about really asking for a bond when we're ready for it, and when we know exactly what we're asking for and what we're promising the community may make more sense than doing now.
Okay. Yeah, Kimberly, please.
I'd like to add to that too, through the chair. I'd like to add to that too, because I came to a similar conclusion this week after talking with Quinn a little bit more too. Like, the public safety facility, if we were to move forward with the consolidation of Fire 2, that's land that we don't have. And so it doesn't, make a lot of sense to ask for that right now. And I totally agree. Like it put things into perspective for me, thinking about like, okay, do we need everything all at once? Do we need to be asking for all of this right now? And I agree. I think the answer is also no.
Kim, can you remind me? I can't remember where you were with the last one. Were you on? Were you full last time? Were you?
Yes,
full
I was.
Over 5 years. Was that what it was, or we talked about full?
I'll
over
be honest.
5 years?
I don't have my notes from
'Cause I
my
can't remember,
term,
and I
but it
didn't
was
bring
full.
my notes either.
I was full.
You were full.
Full.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of time since the last week thinking about like the facilities bond, and Quinn and I talked about this a lot too, and the different special purpose millages. I certainly see the value in facilities bond. Obviously, based on the facilities task force report, our facilities need a lot of work, to put it lightly and mildly inaccurately, because a lot of them are just completely beyond repair. But, and the special purpose millages, on the one hand, I see the value in allocating funds towards specific things so that, for example, if we had a facility special purpose millage, that guarantees that money is going to help us so that we don't ever get to that point again where we are now. However, I just have some concerns about asking, voters for a charter amendment and a special purpose millage, especially because like the scenario I described earlier, if the charter amendment doesn't pass and special purpose millage does, then we don't get anything. And so, that's a reductive way of putting it, but you know what I mean. And so my thought there is if like we were to go the special purpose millage route, like there'd have to be like really, really careful communications around like how that works so that, everyone understands these two things are mutually inclusive. And it's just a lot. And then to your point is, well, okay, we were talking about like, do we really need all of these things all at once? And so now I'm pretty much in the number 2 camp.
Anybody else has thinking that has evolved? Go ahead, Elvita.
Through the chair, I just want to clarify something. So, did I hear correctly, Joe, that you said if we want to go with a full, that it's automatically a 10-year? It can't be 8-year or 5 years?
Through the chair, no, by voting it for a full, it just raises it back to the charter limit of 20, and there's no clock. That's just the new millage, and then it rolls back immediately.
Through the chair, we don't have the ability to set a daylight clause on it, right? So we can't say expires at 5 years. That can't go on the ballot. It's only 8.37 mils to get to 20.
If the choice is a full, yeah, to go to 20, we're telling Treasury that Ferndale's new millage is 20, and that's what they base. That's the new basis now. And then from there, we start rolling back based on the conditions. But you can, the other option is just choosing a number millage, so 5 for X years, and then that's the other alternative.
Yeah, through the chair. I think the question was, what's the time limit or the sunset that they can put on a full millage as opposed to a partial? And it's whatever year you want to put. You could put 2 years, you could put 8 years, you could put 20 years. It's all up to the recommendation.
The distinction there is the term limit makes it not a full. A full is just a blanket reset to 20 mils. Is that correct, Phil? Yeah.
Can you say that again, Joe?
Yeah.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
And this again, I clarified this too with the city attorneys. So if the vote is for a full Headley override, that is a vote that says we want to restore our millage to 20 mils. And because it automatically rolls back, there's not really a term limit they set on that. They just reset it to 20 and it starts rolling back again.
Unless we suggest a term limit or unless the voters, unless it's on the ballot. Maybe?
I guess in that case, we are probably parsing words here, but that wouldn't be a full. That would be, we want a Headley override for X amount for X mils.
Which
So
is the current one we're operating under that expires at the end
correct.
of
This,
2025.
I believe this was at the time of 5 mils or 4.5 mils for 10 years.
So, and just for my sake, because I have, Elvita, you said you wanted 5 years last time. Is that right?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. And so me, you, Quinn, and Kyle are the only ones that had a time limit? Did you have a time limit?
If we had to select a time limit, my preferred time limit would be for 8 years, because that would then align with the next presidential election cycle and would allow the greatest number of residents to weigh in.
And potentially the city to grow to a point where it doesn't need this anymore, or for us to find efficiencies, essentially. Right?
You are putting words in my mouth.
Oh, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. I'm saying that's what I said.
That is what you said, yes.
If the city were to be able to find efficiencies, if there was an 8-year sunset, then after 8 years, this wouldn't be because we'd be able to close that gap, essentially, maybe. If there's a sunset. If there's not a sunset, then there's not a sunset, and it just goes on.
I want to be careful to interrupt. Kyle, did you have something you wanted to add? Okay. So I think what I'm hearing you put on the table for discussion, David, is I think we have to call it a partial, whether it's 8 point something mils or not, because you're suggesting a sunset, but a partial override. Do you have a number of mils?
I was just pointing out that
Okay.
only 4 people had a time
see.
frame.
Yes, that's accurate.
and I wanted to make sure that that was correct,
Okay.
that's all.
Is that still your preference to have a time limit?
That's mine, yes.
Okay. All right. Has anybody else's thinking evolved? Does anybody have any additional information they need to have an opinion on the ballot proposal. Yeah, go ahead, Alvita.
So through the chair, for your first question, my opinion did change to 8-year sunset from 5.
Okay. Go ahead, Brooke.
Through the chair, if we didn't do X mills at X number of years and just said full to 20, that 20 automatically starts rolling back immediately anyway. So at some point in so many years, you would roll back and you could then even do the efficiencies, do the other forms of income, whatever that may be as well. So from what I'm hearing, the full 20 versus an X mills at an X due date are not mutually exclusive. They could technically, my 20 could roll back in the same number of years down to your sunset at X number of years, sort of thing. So I don't think we're even that far apart in that thinking as well. Because my thinking is I want 20, it's gonna immediately roll back anyway. Maybe put some stuff on the ballot in 2 years and look for efficiencies here, pull in that there, you know, there's a lot of moving parts to this. So, you know, just saying 20 versus X mills at X number of years are not necessarily different, per se.
Other thoughts to add to the pool of knowledge? Yes, Simrit, please.
Sorry.
What does the process look like to go from, say, 20 mils if it were to pass, and say roll it back to, say, like 12 mils or whatever? Right now, we've got Headley override expiring, and then in 2025 there's a time limit there. But if we go to 20 mils, what does that process look like? Are we just voting for like a council member that like aligns with their views, or what does it look like?
So the question, I think for Joe, is what is the process for the rolling back of the mills? And you didn't say this, but I wonder if you're also asking about kind of the response to the rolling back of the mills. Is that true? Was that what you were trying to get at? Yeah.
Well, the rollback is really a function of the state's legislation. So if it is 20 mills, then the state, as we've established, is going to look at the growth in our tax base. And based on that growth, if it exceeds inflation, capping at 5%. So if it exceeds inflation, it'll be rolled back to the inflation to make sure that our tax base cannot grow more than the rate of inflation. And so that happens on an annual basis. If you go back to 2015, when this millage was proposed, the city's operating budget, which today is 11.63, was about 15. That is the reason why the vote was for about 5 mills, right? And so we've seen in 10 years that 15 turned to 11.6, and that's what would happen. So we're going to reset it to 20 10 years from now. If this trend continues, your 20 would turn into 15 or 16 mils. So it's always going to deduct, assuming the recession doesn't happen, like 2008.
Other questions? Brooke, you look like, no, okay. Yes, Kyle, please.
Through the chair, so is it still the city council's decision if we were to elect to go up to 20, they could choose in a particular year not to levy the full 20? They could deduct 1 or 2?
Council always has that decision.
Okay, but they can't go up from what's voted and
Correct.
chartered, but they can go down. Okay.
And I think in the riders that were proposed thus far, I seem to recall, although forgive me if I'm wrong, that there was a suggestion that maybe part of the request of city council is that under certain circumstances, they might levy less. I can't remember what the proposed circumstances were, but that's an option too, is to choose the amount of mills and then to ask. Again, it's just, we learned about local mandates. It would just be a local mandate, not binding, but you could ask the city council to pass a resolution to not levy the full amount under certain circumstances. Any other questions, information to add to the pool of knowledge, or evolution in thinking? Yeah, Kate, please.
I guess the only other information to add, just to our collective knowledge, and some folks might be aware of this already, the city has an exemption program for very low income households. I know we've talked about the impact of our decisions on our neighbors, right? And how different people at different income levels may feel these changes. So just to let you know, what's currently on the books is that people can apply for exemptions broadly if their income is 150% of the federal poverty line or less. These are the 2024 numbers. They were easier for me to find in print than the 2023, but real close. So for one person, think about a senior on a fixed income, for example. For one person, that's $22,590 a year. So just to give us, a little bit more information, we do have, and actually our statute's a little more generous than the state's. We do have a process to apply for a property tax exemption, and the council is able to, sort of consider the amount at which they grant that exemption, the income amount at which they grant that exception. They can't go below 100% of federal poverty, but they can go above, and they have.
Thank you, Kate. Other information to add to the pool of knowledge, evolution in thinking, or questions? Just looking at Dale and Jeffrey because they haven't shared any thoughts today. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Do you want to pass him a mic, please?
Through the chair, I very much agree with everything that Brooke said. And that's what I would have said. She said it.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I appreciate the humor as well. Dale, did you want to add anything or no? No? Okay, fair enough. All right. Would you all like to vote?
I believe that we need a little bit of, well, have we made a decision that the motion should be no special purpose millage? So if you are going to make a motion, we need to know what the millage amount is. Yeah, it has to be the whole thing. So it has to be the millage amount. And this goes for everybody. If you want to make a motion, it needs to be the millage amount, the time frame, if the millage amount is less than going up to the 20 mil threshold, and if there is special purpose attached to that. Joe, did I catch that correctly?
Yes, and he's going to put the sample language for the motion on the screen so that you can just fill in the blanks with your proposed motion.
In my email, so actually what I think I'll do is print it out, just so you all have it in front of you.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right. Say it again? Yeah, 2-minute recess.
All right, 2-minute recess. Thank you.
Get more pizza, use the bathroom. I won't call it the potty because we're all adults, but kids have been home from school. It's been a long flippin' week.
Can't potty, by the way.
You're like, no, you can't call it that. You're already now.
Permanently part of my job.
Oh my goodness.
That's one area where we don't. Advisory. Yeah, advisory.
Loud.
Resolution.
Yes, by all means.
The resolution advises.
That one's fine. On the adaptive ones. That's not binding.
So the citizens have to vote.
But they have to vote, correct.
I'm having to text that here. And I had planned activities. Oh no, I'm getting shoulder surgery in a week. All right, the other one probably 6 months after that.
Back on. And we have possible motion.
Oh, to make a motion? Oh, I was gonna make the easy motion. I thought we were taking it.
Well, this is the only motion we have to
Understood.
make. Okay.
And I thought we were taking it in pieces.
I mean, we can have, once the motion is made, discussion about the motion.
And then, Kara, you're going to take the roll call vote, right?
Yes.
Through the chair. Motion.
So,
What? I move to make a motion. Oh, I move to a full Headley override motion. Oh, I'm sorry. I move for approval to recommend City Council consider a Headley override millage to reset the city to its charter amount of 20 mills for the November 2024 general election as submitted by the City Council appointed Finance Committee.
all right, moved by Brooke. Is there a second? Seconded by Jeffrey. So now we have discussion about the motion on the table. We will need to take a vote on this. Now that there has been a motion and a second, we will need to take a vote.
Excuse me, do we take a vote now or after discussion? Okay.
Any discussion? Yes, go ahead, Kate.
I think, I would vote in support of this. There was some conversation about, and I do really value now that we've done this twice, the community sort of team and conversation that comes together as overrides sunset. But I also acknowledge that the first one that happened, there wasn't any sunset. There was just sort of an emergency, right? So that first override that did have a community committee, as was called together by council, didn't necessarily need a time. There was no time limit. We'd never done an override before. So I believe that our council recognizes and our staff recognize that from time to time, as big issues like the operations and support of our general fund, as those come to a head, we need to consult the community. We've done it several times now. I trust that we would do it again. So Brooke's motion did not have a time limit on it. It acknowledges that we'll continue under state law to roll back. We will eventually get to a point where we may need to have another community conversation. I trust that our council at that time would convene one.
Other comments, Simran? Okay, gotcha. Kyle?
Through the chair, I just wanted to add how, like originally, I was always on the fence of doing a bond and just maintaining the partial, but I think through all the conversations we've had, having the flexibility of our elected Ferndale City Council to have the flexibility to make the decision that's right for the city, and going with the full, that's going to give them the headway to be able to start to make action towards some of the facility recommendations. So if we were to just do a partial and have to pass a bond or do things like that, they're still going to take our charter and their commitments to be able to make the city better in the way they see fit, that we voted them to have that power to do so. So originally I was still just being very sensitive to the taxpayer. Obviously, times are hard for a lot of people, even just in the inflationary environment we're in, and being able to keep up. It will be significant in everyone's tax bill. We're going to have the inflation of 5%, and then on top of that, having this increase. So it's putting a lot back on the city to be able to take this additional investment, if it's voted in and accepted, to then turn around and see it put into action and make the city better for the people that voted into place. So just a general comment of acceptance.
Thank you, Kyle. Is Greg allowed to talk during the motion discussion? Chair?
Yes. No.
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 Okay.
Sorry, Greg.
Okay, and you know what, I just wanted to say that my position still hasn't changed. I don't think that we've taken necessary steps to go and ask our community to go to the state maximum level of property taxes. I don't think that we're quite there yet, especially without a time limit on this. And I do think that it does say a lot about our community to have the highest rate available to us. And I think that maybe you could get there, but we haven't gone there yet. And I think we're heading to the easy answer too fast.
Oh, go ahead, Brooke. I just want a point of clarification. Are they, at what point, if somebody had an alternate motion to make or a revision to the motion, would they do that?
Understanding from a recent conversation with the city clerk is that if there is a motion on the table, there cannot be
A
another.
second.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'd vote on this, and then if, for example, David would want to offer a refined motion, he
So
could.
if, my
Very
understanding
good.
is that if this motion does not pass, then we would be
Very
able
good.
to take a new motion. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, this motion, after voted upon, if it failed, someone would just propose an alternate motion, and then you can go forth from there.
Got it. Go ahead, Brooke.
Through the chair. With my motion, I did not mention anything about riders or recommendations.
So riders and recommendations do not need to be part of what we're voting on right now. So after we have, that's great, thank you for that. After this discussion, we are going to have a different discussion about any other riders that we want to include, so recommendations for the report, and alternate recommendations, assuming that there are alternate, no votes on this particular motion.
Great, thank you for that clarification. I also wanted to say that for me personally, I would like to see certain recommendations. I would like to see certain caveats, all of those things put into place, and we've discussed a lot of those in the past. I don't think the 4 months that we've spent learning, 4 months learning about all of these things, I don't see it as the easy answer. I see it as the most succinct and most easily understood answer that can be communicated effectively to the entire city, all of the voters, while also maintaining the, the purpose and all of the things that we've learned that the city of Ferndale wants to accomplish and what its voters through the surveys want to have accomplished and things like that. So while I don't see it as an easy answer, I see it as an answer that can bring the greatest good, understanding that there's hardships and there are things that we're asking for that are going to hurt financially to a lot of people. But I would like to say that in our recommendations, in our riders, we can recommend to City Council how we can then offset that, how we can put in there, we don't recommend that you go to the full 20 if X, Y, and Z. We recommend you find efficiencies elsewhere. We recommend you look into income tax and other ways of bringing in income. So while I'm cognizant to those not 60-some% that it will affect the most, I do see it as a way of giving City Council, our elected officials, the best opportunity to be able to take what voters are telling them they want and doing it while also having my voice be heard in the report that we're giving about how we also feel that they should be cognizant of all the things that we've discussed during that time.
Through the chair. Okay, so we go for a full override. I get hung up on the whole facilities thing. So where does that leave that?
So the motion that is on the table right now is for going up to 20 mils, and it does not include any special purpose millage.
Do we have a say-so in, we get 4 extra mills, basically?
4 mils above our current you know, what we need to operate the city.
Can we make recommendations with that?
We can.
Yeah. Thanks. This is hard stuff for me. I'm sorry. It's just, it's
Thank
tough.
you.
So
Through the chair, Dale, were you wanting to offer an amendment to the motion, or were you more interested in having, you know, including in our recommendation to the council kind of a statement of priorities or goals, or this thing that we're talking about, riders, you know, saying that we really encourage you to prioritize these things? The latter? Okay. Just make sure.
Anyone else with comments? All right. I will say that for me, my deep fear is that we ask voters for 20 mils and they say no, and we get nothing. That is my fear. I do really applaud all of you, though, for being so passionate about, you've really done the work to research this and understand this. And I think that that's your understanding now combined with your passion to advocate for this is really powerful. And I really appreciate that about all of you. So thank you. Any other comments before we go to roll call vote?
Through the chair. I am in support of this, and I just want to point out too that going on 8 years ago now, when I first moved to Ferndale, if you had asked me if I support this then after my pop-up, I would have said absolutely not, because I was freaking out about, and I know that's proposal A, that's not Headley, but learning everything that we've learned through being on this committee, I still feel very strongly about the full Headley override, and that is not how I would have felt years ago. And I think that it's a testament to how much we've been able to learn and to discuss with each other and compromise with one another. And I also, I want to point out too that the 20 mils, like I don't want to say it's a misrepresentation, because it's not, but like we would never get to that 20 mil because it would immediately start rolling back. And so that to me, this just allows the city, I agree with everything that Brooke said. It's, when I hear that you say simple, I hear the word flexible. I hear flexibility. Not just that it's necessarily the simplest, like, oh, it's the easiest to understand, because it's certainly not. It offers the city the most flexibility and the best chance at being able to do a lot with, one simple thing that we could give them. So that was a little rambly, but I just wanted to throw in my POV there that this committee has helped me understand a lot of what I did not understand before. And I came to the conclusion that I did in spite of where I was years ago.
through the chair, Kimberly, I commented last week exactly the same thing. There was a time when I would be like, no way, I'm not. But spending the time that I have learning about how the city operates has been nothing short of fascinating.
Brittany.
I think that as a group, this may technically be our last meeting of sorts. We have a couple more tasks, but our work is it's not done here. It's up to us to take and help people understand that. And that makes me feel good about this whole thing too, is because it wasn't a time that long ago I felt just like you. So it's up to us to start to educate the community. And I think that's important.
Anyone else? No. All right, Kara, I think we are ready for roll call vote. Brittany, if I can have you hand off the microphone just so every side of the table has a microphone so that we can be clearly heard.
Okay. Baker,
Yes.
Steinbelly,
Yes.
Hoppy,
No.
Pita. Lennox,
Yes.
Loftus,
Yes.
Lozano,
Yes.
Savoy,
Yes.
Rollo,
Yes.
and Ziegler.
No. All right, thank
yeses
you,
to two
everybody. I
noes.
really appreciate that. That motion does now carry. So that will be our primary recommendation in our recommendation report. So with that, Brittany, I think we're going to let's talk about riders. Let's talk about what else we want in here. This does not require a motion, so I anticipate that this will be some discussion. But the good thing is that from my conversations with most of you this past week, I feel that there is already general consensus on a lot of this. So like Joe said in his email, these are separated out into set 1, set 2, and set 3. These are not slates. If you like something from set 1 that is not in set 2, absolutely, we can add it in, no problem. So we can pick and choose, but we do need to come to a general consensus around what we are going to recommend. The only reason I separated these into sets is that they were written by 3 different authors and it didn't really make sense for me to put them all side by side. So just for readability, they are in different sets. So I'm going to kind of go through these, maybe like, what do you want to do?
Given time, I think we should just talk about them at a high level rather than the specific language. And if you have specific language you feel strongly about, I think we should talk about that language as well. But maybe we just take them one at a time. And since the first one that came up during conversation, I think we should start with I think you call them declarations, is that correct, Joe? Any declarations you would like to include in the recommendation that you'd like to ask the city council to make in terms of the use of the funds or anything else? Would anybody like to put something on the table on that, in that regard?
So I will say, I believe the first recommendation was around efficiencies, right? That's what you're looking for?
No,
Or
efficiencies, I think, well, I was talking more about alternatives to special purpose millage, like restrictions or don't levy the full amount, but for that type of declaration. The other items I have listed here are additional revenue. So this would be where we talk about maybe income tax, alternative service models. So this is where we talk about like regionalism, looking into consolidation. And the last one I have here is efficiency. And if there's others, we can talk about others as well. Yes, please, Kate.
The top 3 priorities that I would have if I were to ask council to prioritize this funding, understanding that council, has an agreed upon set of goals and priorities that they look to. But I would ask for them to prioritize the facilities task force recommendations, potentially even through non-voted bonds. If this is now a longer term, not a sunsetted override, they could potentially do bond debt service repayment out of this general fund pot. So facilities task force recommendations, potentially bonds, restoring recreation funding, and competitive salaries / retention. Those are my top 3 notes. If I were king, David, and got to ask council to prioritize. Competitive salaries / retention. We've talked a lot about the challenges of not having the flexibility. Part of that is a facilities issue. Part of it is a salary and benefits issue.
Any others somebody would like to add to the list? Go ahead, Brooke.
Through the chair. I would like to suggest a declaration around city's communication producing the educational document regarding pop-ups to prospective home buyers. How that looks, I don't know, whether it's a one-pager, a website, a requirement to real estate agents, however that may come about. I would like to see some sort of communication around that.
Through the chair, I'd like to add to that. This is something that Quinn and I talked about the other day. I think that that's something, I don't know if we could require it of realtor, but I think that the simplest, lowest touch option would be to have it on the city's website and then just, sorry. Have it on the city's website, have it written up and on the city's website, and, you know, have the communications department, you know, figure out some way to disseminate that to people so that they know. Maybe it's like during peak home buying and selling season, something like that. But I fully support that. I would have loved that when I moved to Ferndale. I'm wondering too if it could also be something where, you know, when I moved here, I had to come to City Hall to drop off paperwork. I'm wondering if that's something that could, I know that would be after papers are signed and everything, but just things to consider. I think that is absolutely something that Ferndale could provide to people who are thinking about moving here that would set us apart. Again, it's not something that we have to do. It's something we choose to do because we value our community.
So I agree with this. This is the piece informing new home buyers that their property taxes are going to go up essentially. Is it, what's it called? Pop-up? Okay, you call it the pop-up. Shouldn't we just be shouldn't the city be directing people to the tool that's online by the state? I mean, it's a very good. And I mean, I know that the assessor says that they don't chase sell prices, but it's darn close. I mean, if you're trying to, like I think that it would be a fantastic thing to just, because I think that site is really updated, isn't it?
I think that's part of what we're saying is part of this, like that would be part of this disclosure.
Okay.
Is directing them to that tool, or you know.
I mean, does that provide what you're looking for, Quinn? Okay.
Does anybody disagree with this idea?
Or know what I'm talking about?
No. As with a lot of this stuff, through the chair, as with a lot of this stuff, the KISS method is the best thing that we can have. Communications about this, in my opinion, need to be kept simple for time elements, expense, etc. While I'm talking, the whole facilities thing has been a huge deal for me. That's my number one priority here. The whole gamut of what we did and what we studied, that's very, very important. I mean, we don't even have a senior center anymore, so it really needs to be looked into.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Through the chair, to Dale's point, I think like it was kind of one of the compromises I made to recommend to go to full would be to leave off a bond with the assumption that that extra mill gap is giving us the money to then prioritize and go towards the facilities. So with that, I would lean strongly into the declaration recommending that to the city, just so it's made clear that they are taking that seriously and will go out, issue the bonds, and start building. So.
Through the chair, I agree.
Yep.
Through the chair, me too.
Should
we do some sort of, here are my top three, let's see how much they overlap, or no?
I think we should take them one at a time.
Okay.
So I just want to start with, no, it's okay. It's okay. I can keep track of one at a time and then just bring us back, because then if we have consensus, we can take them off and just like set them aside. So first, is there anybody who objects to this idea of including language in the recommendation report about asking the city to improve its communications with new home buyers, maybe on a web page, leave it kind of open-ended because we don't know the right answer. Kara, thank you. We trust you well. But that they need to do something to communicate with new home buyers and leverage existing tools like the state website. Does anybody disagree with that recommendation? Okay. All right.
Can I add a point
Yes,
of clarity
please.
around it through the chair? Right now, like they do tell you, oh, like your property taxes are subject to change after you buy your house. I think that what we're all collectively recommending here is something much more detailed than that. That's because you read something like that and you're like, well, duh, that's gonna happen.
Right.
But something much more detailed, specifying like what that pop-up is and the potential impact of it.
Yes. All right, and I saw Kara, she's taking notes and nodding her head. So, and I trust, I think Joe is taking notes too. Yep, so we got it. And because there's only so much space now at the top of this list.
I'd be remiss to not be annoying about that.
No, I appreciate it. This will be necessary both for conversation, but also for the actual writing of the report. So is there anybody who disagrees with this? All right, good. Okay, so we're gonna just call that done. We'll set that aside. Let's not talk about that anymore. You all will get to read the recommendation and make sure the language reflects what you believe to be true about that. Is there anybody who disagrees? And I say this not because I don't want anybody to disagree, but because it's just an easier way than saying who agrees with. Who disagrees, if anybody, with the idea of asking the city council to prioritize I think we should be careful about our language around here, but the override millage toward the facilities task force recommendations. Not that it would necessarily all go, but to prioritize it. Does anybody disagree with that statement? 2 down. All right. Do you want to move to the next ones here, or did somebody have something they wanted to?
Through the chair. Sorry, real quick. Are we kind of going through all of them? Or is it sort of like a free-for-all?
It's a free-for-all.
Okay. Love it. Okay.
We're prioritizing with our feet by talking about the things that are most important to us. But we're staying on one topic at a time if we could.
So I think that one overarching thing that I've taken away from this whole experience is I don't believe that consistent Headley overrides are sustainable in like the long term. I would love if there was some way, and I know that we've learned a lot about how we are sort of our hands are tied by the state in many ways, but I would love to reduce our dependence on Headley overrides if we can, because I don't believe that this is sustainable to keep, having committees form and figuring out what we're going to do. I think that it's kind of kicking a can down the road. I also am attracted to the idea of regionalism. If there's a way that we can, I know that Joe has mentioned that regional government might be, kind of where things are heading. If that's, I would be curious to learn more about that. If that could help strengthen communities by bringing them together and ease the financial burden on people.
Go ahead, David.
So for a potential rider, that could look something like saying, please investigate opportunities for improving regionalism and gaining efficiencies through there. Does that sound right? Okay.
Go ahead,
Can I
David.
ask, I mean, that's really right along the lines of what I was saying, but I was putting a target on it.
So tell us what you're proposing.
It's number 1 on the sheet.
Can you read it? Or maybe just can you summarize it in a sentence or two? Oh, 1.5 million. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm
So
saying
seek to save.
Well, We ask City Council to direct the City Manager's Office to target 1.5 million in savings efficiencies or alternative funding methods and/or development efforts in a way the city benefits from such development in the short term. Any targeted savings or efficiencies should directly reduce the amount of mills imposed as part of our proposed increase in mills.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Through the chair, could we headline that with the other recommendation of reducing our dependence on Headley overrides with the X number of,
I'm saying
correct.
that regionalism is maybe one of the conclusions that
Correct.
we come from. So I was saying that it's kind of hand in hand. the regionalism.
I think I agree with you on that, in that if we recommended to City Council that we prioritize finding ways to reduce dependency on future Headley overrides by looking into efficiencies, looking into regionalism, and all of these other ways of finding money elsewhere, basically.
Consolidating lockup.
Right,
one
all
thing
of
that
these
we said.
things. Efficiencies, consolidation, income tax, all of these ways that we've listed out in many, many, okay, sorry, many separate ways we could blanket all of those under a reduced dependency on future Headley overrides.
And I think what David was putting on the table, the specific point he was making is the idea of a target, an amount. Is that correct?
The idea of City Council recommending, seeking towards that, because 1.5 million, it seems really high, probably, but you target higher than what you're probably going to end up with.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Through the chair, can I ask where you got that 1.5 million?
I just came up with that.
Okay, that was just pulled out of air.
It was pulled out of the air.
Got it.
Yep.
I think what I'm hearing him say is it's big enough that it feels big, and it would be maybe a stretch, and that would be the idea. Go ahead, Kyle. Yep.
The chair, so just reading this verbatim, I guess your recommendation would be for council to make a declaration that if the city hits its target of 1.5, they will reduce the mills to offset that amount. Is that correct?
That was my recommendation in a rider. Yep.
What are your thoughts on that, Kyle?
It's kind of, like, I don't think it has to be one or the other. Like, I think no matter what, the city should be driving to find efficiencies and reporting out what we're doing to be able to do that. But then if we do free up that money, if we don't mandate that or ask the council to force that, then they can still levy them out if they see needed, then can then go and do the facilities task force recommendations. So if we save 1.5 million, target that out for 5 years, then we can put a capital investment down to be able to instead do a facilities improvement.
So then what I hear you saying is that you disagree with the savings or efficiencies reducing the amount of the millage.
Yes, but I think I still agree with the declaration that, like the facilities declaration, that they will put money towards it, and then just kind of having a declaration that they will find efficiencies. They will be saving money and doing that, but not necessarily cutting the pocket at the same time.
So then if we find efficiencies, then essentially that will not be passed on to anybody. It will not be passed on to the taxpayer.
It will be passed on to the taxpayer and community benefits, right? We'll have better facilities. We'll be able to spend the money better ways. So
Okay.
that's my opinion.
Did you have something to add about this?
I do. So I would be really shocked if there was $1 million. I would be completely blown out of the water if there was $1 million in savings. If of all of the documentation that the city has provided and that is publicly available online, I don't think it's there. I think the city should look for efficiencies, absolutely. But I think we do a disservice by asking the city to sort of really, really knuckle down and figure out, how do we cut $1.5 million? Because the answer might be cut Parks and Rec. Now we have $1.5 million or however much, that'll save. So
Line with the
I,
community value.
I would not be in support of putting a specific target on it because I don't know what an appropriate target would be.
Gives. Yeah, Dale, did you have something?
I have to agree with you, Quinn, with what you just said. Isn't the city always working to improve spending? And publicly, it's very available to see. Yeah.
So I understand that you guys don't like the 1.5 million, but can we all agree that we have not had a specific mandate to the city management to actually seek out something or to seek out a specific, or has there been?
Oh, council's done that. Oh, yeah. I mean, the email that Joe, if you ever want to talk about, well, I'm not in city council anymore, that email that Joe sent about summarized it. So we've had to make significant council directed mandates related to cuts. A community requested mandate may be new though.
I guess I'm saying, an actual, okay, but I'm saying an actual ask to go through what did we say, transparent and open?
Yeah, it is the first section down to the first section that has the bold down to the next bold is my recommendation for how we look at efficiency reviews.
And the difference between mine and yours is a number and like a beginning and an end, essentially. Because did you say I didn't read this yet, but does it say ongoing?
Mine is ongoing, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Quinn's is ongoing and it seems maybe targeted to fit in with the way that annual budgeting is already done.
Yeah. Yeah, so it would include both, annual, but the reviews would be included in the annual budgeting process to make sure that spending is in line with regional benchmarks and industry best practices. And then also, if there is some new expenditure that comes up suddenly, let's make sure we're not overpaying just because it popped up suddenly.
I think the difference in my mind between what David's saying and what Quinn's saying, memories are short, right? So we could ask council for ongoing, transparent changes to budget processes, and then, staff changes, council members change, a number in writing that next year David can stand up in front of council and say, remember how we recommended that you were going to find $1.5 million? And right, that's a different type of line in the sand versus ongoing process.
And I'm not suggesting only efficiency. When I say efficiencies, I don't mean cutting people. I mean finding alternative ways to fund things that
Agreed.
Are currently in the general fund, and by golly, we're able to fund the purchase of this capital equipment or whatever, and alleviate some of that from the general fund.
Yeah, and we may.
I'm not saying cut people. I'm saying just do a review.
Yeah, through the chair, the dollar amount may be arbitrary, but it does maybe carry slightly more weight. If we have a committee member that wants to remind the council of it, a bond would be appealing to me because it means this is exactly what's happening, and we just locked it in with the Treasury Department, and this is what we're doing for the next 20 years. That's one of the reasons, even if we had to do it in a couple of years, I'd be supportive of it, as opposed to council changes in a couple of years, and are they still committed to facilities? But I get it's trade-offs, right? We're working together, but that's how I interpret the difference between what you're recommending and what Quinn's recommending.
And I did just want to point out, Kate, that the recommendation that I have, it is ongoing, yes. And it does not have a specific target because I don't know what an appropriate target would be. And it would change. But it does include an annual report out to the public And that report out would include, so the goal, the twofold goals are ensuring that our purchasing processes and delivery channels are in line with practices. And it's also intended to build community trust in financial government of the city in an easy-to-read report that serves as a historical record of change.
Through the chair, I don't know why I just did that. I just want all the microphones. Sorry. So I hear what you're saying is you want like an actual target, and I think it's important to have like the numbers are important because it's something not arbitrary. My concern with 1.5 million, because you said you don't want it to affect, you don't want to cut people, you don't want to cut jobs. My immediate thought at seeing that figure is I don't know how we would hit that without cutting people. So maybe like, and what I'm hearing from you, Quinn, is your piece about this being ongoing. It's a historical record of say savings and efficiencies that the city has been able to achieve over a period of time. Maybe those numbers and those figures can come in that way where we're saying, okay, well, year over year, we saved X amount on such and such program. Year over year, we, or this program started costing us more and here's why, because material costs went up, things like that.
So I hear what you guys are all saying, but I will tell you that when I go to work, if there's a mandate from the CEO of a company that says, hey, we need to cut expenditures by 10% so that we can target this, and then you look back and say, were we able to get there or not? And a lot of times bonuses are tied to that, a lot of times, and it's a targeted metrics that, first year, if you target 1.5 million and we hire an outside consultant that comes in and says, by golly, you can't find anything, and maybe we change it, maybe that target changes, but it's just a target to say, well, this is what we were shooting for. We were able to get to 1 million. That's fantastic because we found $1 million of savings. Arbitrary numbers are okay, aren't they?
So I'd like to hear from some of the other folks on the committee.
Yep.
So when I first read this before we were talking about it, I thought your 1.5 M was 1.5 mils. Would there be a reason to think about it in terms of number of mils rather than dollars?
I think I'm hearing from David openness to exactly what the target is, but a desire to have a target. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Brooke.
I'm afraid a target like $1.5 million is going to bring me back to my example of when I have a heart attack, but the ambulance that shows up is Acme ambulance and not of quality or a timely ambulance. And it would show great efficiency in savings, but it's not what I want.
Jeffrey, I think what I'm hearing you say is that your measure of success is not necessarily the same measure that's being proposed, which would be cost savings.
Correct.
Okay. Fair point. Brooke?
But wait,
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry, Jeffrey. Sure.
I don't mean to be shooting down David's idea at all, because I think it's a good idea to look into other options, like regionalism, like the ones we've already mentioned, of course.
Through the chair, I'd like to agree with that as well. And maybe we could all think about how that would look for us. Would that be $1.5 million? Would that be 2 mils? Would that be a 10% year over year? Would that be a 50% year over year? Whatever that may look like to you, is that putting a quantitative data number on it important enough to make that be one of the riders on the report, I guess is where that would come down. To you, David, it seems like that would be something that you would definitely want in the rider, as that's what you wrote on our sheet. And maybe to all of us, that may look different to all of us. So maybe that's the language that we could include. Whereas it may not be a dollar amount, a percentage amount, a mill amount. It may be a change over time or and I get the business model sort of example of that, but we're not looking at bonuses. We're not looking at getting promotions. We're not looking at that. Government, is different than a business model. So you also have to keep that in mind when you're talking about KPIs and key performance indicators and all of those business things that they talk about, in corporate America. It's different in a government, and we have to look at it that way as well.
Okay. I mean, does it make sense to just maybe come back to this? We just know that there's going to be a number there, and maybe we.
I do think if we're going to have a target,
or-
are you asked,
I was going to say maybe
Joe?
Joe or Phil has an opinion on what is reason, like I don't know if we've looked to other communities. Have other communities done this, and what do they come up with? How does this normally work? Like what would if council were to say if council were to come to Joe and say, hey, we want you to save $1.5 million next year, would you look at them and be like, you're crazy? Or would you think, okay, I'm going to see what we can do? And I don't know.
Yeah, through the chair. Well, the way I've approached it, and I've kind of been consistent about this, I am very open for regionalism. So I look at partnerships, number of touch points. My key metric would be the number of actions I've taken to try to pursue alternative service models or to pursue regionalism. And I can give one concrete example where Ferndale, we led a coalition with Oakland County Parks to develop a plan for a 9-mile corridor plan. The whole goal would be to establish a mental or psychological connection along the 9-mile corridor communities from Hazel Park to Novi. So we played a big leadership role in that. Oakland County Parks, we brought them to the table and they paid for it. That plan got adopted, and now Oakland County Parks is going to pay for a complete rebranding initiative across the corridor for every community. So that's an example. We desperately need updated wayfinding downtown. Signage plans are pretty expensive. Oakland County is paying for it. That's not 1.5 million, but that's an example. That's probably between $50,000 to $75,000 that we'll benefit from. So I would use that as an example. But those, I didn't start with a metric in mind. I started with an idea about regionalism. And spoiler alert, my ultimate hope is that we co-opt Oakland County Parks and we can eventually get a park authority down 9 Mile because our communities are much closer than we think they are. Wouldn't it be great to use a Rouge River kayak facility at Southfield in 10 years for Ferndale residents with Ferndale rates? That'd be great. So
Go ahead, Simrit.
I think personally, I'm just concerned that this is even here because I feel like if we're saying that, hey, we should look into $1.5 million in savings. We're operating under the assumption that city workers have not been doing that already. I also think that just looking at the numbers, you look at, I don't know, your landscapers for the city, $15 an hour. You look at your parking, it's already like an exorbitant amount, and that brings in like $1.5 to $2 million. And even facilities, like we've been underspending in terms of, I feel like we've already been doing a lot of and I think just the process of spending money needs to be looked at rather than just coming up with an amount and operating under the assumption that there is. So I do think we should be mindful of any amount of money that whole 1.5 million in cost savings. How the government is spending money right now. And even if it was like $50,000, I don't think it'd be right. I think civic engagement, through like committee meetings, doing benchmarking with other cities. I'm not in support of this.
Alvita, did you have a thought? It looked like you might have something to add.
Sure, thank you, through the chair. So I would be okay with having a number added if it would, let's say, for instance, like 1 million over 5 years. If they had a goal. And I think per Joe's example, that there are a lot of ways that you could prove efficiencies. That's my 2 bits.
One last bit, through the chair. I almost feel like it's an insult to Joe that we're suggesting there's 1.5 million of fat that he hasn't found yet. I mean, he can find one efficiency and it could, I don't know, we switch over all our city trucks to corn oil instead of using gasoline. And then it does nothing but snow for the next 3 months. So might have saved in gas, but we blew the rest in manpower. It ended up costing more, but we were more efficient. But we're not going to hit this number. No way, no how. I'm not saying we won't, just as in this example. And I just think we need to be careful. I think Joe's doing a great job.
I don't mean that at all. All I'm suggesting is that there has never, that when we started asking the question about efficiencies, it was kind of difficult to answer, and we came up with a lot of different things. And I think that it would be great to have a scorecard of those efficiencies. It would be great to keep track of them. That's all.
So let me go ahead, Kimberly, and then I want to outside in identify the areas that we seem to have agreement on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think what I'm hearing is through the chair. What I'm hearing is folks, myself included, are hung up on the number, specifically that the number is so high. And I also have a concern about having a number on it over X number of years, because I think about, you know, our cost of living increases from year to year. Like I know that like I can't say to myself, well, I want to trim X amount from my own personal budget over the next 5, 10, however many, because I won't be able to, because things will cost more in 5 or 10 years. So I'm sensitive to the fact that we want like a metric of some sort. And I do think that Quinn's suggestion will lend itself to that, where we will have that data to support the efficiencies that we are able to find. Yes, they won't be hitting a specific target, but I think that what we've learned over the past few months is that things are so much more nuanced and complicated than that, and there are so many dependencies, like what Jeffrey just mentioned, that we'll be able to show where we've achieved those efficiencies without necessarily having to put a lot of very complex and intricately interwoven factors against one single black and white metric.
Let me recap where I think we have agreement. So I think we have agreement that there's a desire to reduce reliance on Headley. I think we have agreement that it is a good to pursue regionalism, consolidation, and efficiencies. And I think we have agreement that the city could do more to report out annually to residents about all of this work. Is it true that we have agreement on all 3 of those things? Is there anybody who disagrees with any of that? No. Okay. All right. Is there anything that I did not observe as an area of agreement that you all think is an area of agreement? All right. Is there anything that we have not talked about that you would like to propose be added that you think there could be agreement on? I'll just offer up, Joe mentioned this idea of having some sort of metric around the number of actions that the city should take, or I don't know if you have anything more specific on that, but Is that a metric that would help it feel a little bit more accountable, help it feel like the city would need to be a little bit more accountable? Go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, I think what I mean by that, and I'll use my small example a minute ago. We go through the practice and motions of those things, and we churn those things out, but I don't specifically report on it. So I think there is some power in the recommendation of a report, but that in and of itself, I'm thinking about this, and if we set either engagement or action targets, I think it's reasonable to ask the city manager, pending council approval, to explore opportunities for authority and put on a light in Ferndale and say, we're open for a parks authority, we're open for fire authority, we're open to talk about these things. And so I don't have the verbiage for you to articulate right now, but I think, theoretically, I think that is a good place to start, as an annual report of efforts we've undertaken to try to explore alternative service models. What have we done? And that's an extension of City Council's strategic plan, because regionalism is in their strategic plan. That's something we're supposed to focus around. And I think, putting a little bit more emphasis on that would be an interesting part of the report out.
Other suggestions? Go ahead, Quinn.
One thing that we have not talked about yet, but I think that there is general consensus at this table on, is asking the city to create a report on the feasibility of initiating a tax. We don't know enough about it, and so having some sort of a report that looks at the feasibility and is reported out to the public could be a method of reduced reliance on the Headley in the future.
Seeing a lot of head nodding. Does anybody disagree with that? Yeah, go ahead, Simran. Yep.
Not disagreement, but I think just tax in general. So
Yeah,
whether it's
alternatives.
income tax or sales tax or whatever.
Can't do the sales tax.
Right.
I know. You
Sure.
weren't here last time we talked about that.
And maybe that can be something discussed in that report of the feasibilities. What can and cannot be done within the
Good.
city.
Thank you, Quinn.
Through the
Yeah,
chair.
go ahead, Kimberly.
I think, so I know that we're talking about this in the context of it
Yes.
reducing our reliance on Headley, but I think that report should include, like Joe put together those models for us to look at, like, okay, what would these sample property tax bills look like with these different, options that we were weighing and considering. I think that should be done for, as part of this income tax report as well. Like, were we to look into this and implement it, it should show like what your taxes could look like and how that would, because my fear is that it wouldn't come across that this would be an effort to reduce our dependence on Headley. My fear is that it would come across like we're talking about Headley override and an income tax, and
Addition to.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
I want
Which
that.
is not what we.
Right. No, that's absolutely not what we want. So,
Right.
not what I want. I don't want to speak for everybody at this table, but that's
Yes.
just something I think is really important.
Through the chair, if I may, in my research about the income tax, I did note that East Lansing, when they adopted it, looked at creating a relationship between the estimates of revenue that the annual income tax would make and the millage rate. So for an example, if the income tax is predicted to raise $4 million in East Lansing, then they would have to reduce the millage rate based on that increment. By virtue of an income tax, they have to go through that exercise every year. So that could be a point, that putting a relationship on it.
Okay, so let me recap where I think we have agreement, which is a statement about reducing reliance on Headley, including exploring an income tax, any other revenue options, and in this report and study, making sure to be explicit about the tax implications. And again, just underscoring that the purpose of this is to reduce reliance on property taxes. Yeah. Yeah. So, so it's not an additional layer of revenue that is being recommended, but an alternative. Agreement that we should recommend that the city investigate opportunities for regionalism, consolidation, and efficiency. and that they produce an annual report of efforts undertaken and savings achieved. Anything else for this list? Go ahead, Quinn.
So this does not fall under reducing reliance. It's a separate topic. But I
Wait, can we finish this one?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on this one? Okay. I know we don't need a formal vote, but who are our dissenting opinions about this being the totality of this rider? Okay, no dissenting votes. Great. Okay, so we're going to move on to additional riders. Quinn.
So the other thing that we had talked about was a facilities bond. And we could potentially recommend that council consider that as a potential ballot initiative for 2025 or some future year at the discretion of council, to once additional questions regarding facilities have been answered.
Through the chair, I added a little caveat to that one, in my opinion. Recommend a facilities bond be placed on the ballot in some future date if determined from annual reporting and or updated figures and facts from the facilities task force would warrant that to be happening. For me personally, I don't want to pigeonhole City Hall into making a declaration saying that City Council into making a declaration saying that they will put that facilities bond in the future. I think with all of the non-specificity that we want to put on the full 20 mils, maybe that, money could be found within that 20 mils.
I agree.
Just in my opinion, I think the 20 mils is a lot. And I think by going the declaration route, having the city council say we will use this money towards facilities, I think that's accomplishing the goal. So for that, I really wouldn't be in favor of putting verbiage towards a facilities bond. I would put it back on the city and give a recommendation that they use that avenue with the funds we've approved. I think going to 20 mils is already going to be taking a lot out of citizens' pockets, and at this time going back in the pot, I think the city should be more efficient, do some of these other find efficiencies to be able to still accomplish the facilities goals with that money. So that's where I stand on that.
So question for you. Our recommendation for 20 mils to council is just that, a recommendation.
Yep.
They do not have to take that recommendation. If they opt for a different number, do we want to include some language around a facilities bond? Or do we not want to say anything about a facilities bond at all?
I would say no to a facilities bond. I think just the declaration and the recommendation of Mills, that's still putting their intent forward that they will be using this additional funds towards that.
Okay. Love to hear from other people.
Does anybody else suggest that we recommend a facilities bond for a future date? Yes.
We're going to need it if we want to get any of this done within like the next 20 to 30 years. It's not going to be just enough to have the mills that are available under a full Headley override. So I will always be on team facilities bond. It's also one of the only ways that as a longtime resident, I'm going to feel like I'm paying my fair share, right? So this is one of the reasons I'm glad we're thinking about, things like income taxes, and I hope that we would think about things like bonds. I have very little control over the fact that I am paying less than the newer residents at this table. So we have a huge list of facilities needs. We've deferred really significant investments for decades. And I'd rather pay for what we want and get the right thing than nibble around the edges and get, you know, small investments. I'd rather have a community center than a pavilion in Martin Road Park. I'd rather have a police and fire headquarters than a slightly spruced up fire station number one. Like, I'd really actually like to invest in what we want and need.
Through the chair, I am fully okay with, you know, saying no facilities bond right now, but I think that especially, you know, it'll be much easier if we could say right now that we had the land for like the public safety. Yeah, absolutely. I think eventually, yes, I agree with Kate there that we're going to need it eventually, because my concern is the longer that we wait. And again, I am recommending that we do wait, but not too long, because the key takeaway from the facilities task force report was stop throwing good money after bad. So the longer that we wait, I worry the longer we're going to be throwing that good money after the bad.
Just a point of a logistical point. We are almost at time. Can we go over if we choose to as a group? Yeah. Would everybody be comfortable staying extra to try to, I think we can get there. I believe in you. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. Yeah. Do we, okay. Do we need a quick break? Yes, please. It's not public comment yet. Yes. Oh, yes. 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 No, I'm just, that was what my point of clarification is. There is no time limit that I think we have to keep within. I was just asking the group if they were willing to stay, and we would not cut out public comment. The idea would be to finish our work together, then have public comment, then conclude the meeting. Yes, David, did you have a question? Okay. Is everybody good with that? Does anybody need a break to, okay. All right. Okay. So we have a couple of people, so it's not clear to me. So I think what's being proposed, Quinn, I'm going to say this back to you to make sure, is not to recommend a facilities bond, but to let, in the report, to let the city council know that depending on what happens with the efficiencies, the regionalism, et cetera, that you all see that this may be necessary. And if so, you think it should wait. It shouldn't be done immediately. But you kind of, it's like, I see you out there, facilities bond. Is that what you're saying?
The bond has to be a ballot initiative. And so our recommendation would be to council, you know, on here I had 2025, not beholden to that. But our recommendation to council could be, we recommend that a facilities bond be considered for the future for combined police and fire and for Martin Road Park, because there are still unknowns about these. We want to wait until there's more information available.
Okay, and I think Joe has a point of clarification.
The bond does, with a revenue stream that's ample enough, the bond does not have to be on the ballot. City council could authorize a resolution to issue a general obligation bond paid for by our property taxes and guaranteed by the property taxes.
And just to make sure we're all talking the same language here, since they recommended a full override, is there sufficient, I don't know the words, bonding capacity in order to do that without an additional ballot proposal?
The city does have enough bonding capacity. I confirmed that with our bond counsel. And I'm sorry, I included some debt service schedules, which aren't really fun to read, but
I had no idea what that meant.
our finance advisor assumed that, you know, I gave him some general assumptions.
Okay.
And $45 million would be the facilities needs. And I kind of took that money from the task force report.
Okay.
And he said over a 30-year period, that would be about 2.5 mils.
Yeah. So I think.
Debt service on that.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing being discussed is some people would like to call attention to the idea that in the future a facilities bond ballot proposal may be needed, while others are observing that there will be sufficient bonding capacity within the current recommendation should bonds be needed for the facilities to address that within the current recommendation. It's a good start. Okay. So it's, I can't read the faces of the people who aren't speaking. So maybe if folks could just indicate who, again, we can have more discussion. This is not a formal vote, but just to give me as the facilitator a sense of where the energy is. Who is inclined to include language around a future facilities bond in the recommendations? Raise your hand, please. Yes, please.
Through the chair. So we have an extra 4 mills. And we say we want that to be earmarked toward the facilities thing. How does that work with, now we're talking about bonds, because that 4 mills isn't going to pay for hardly anything, right?
So we're going to ask council to prioritize facilities with those additional 4 mills. That's our recommendation that we've already decided on. There is within those 4 mills this sufficient bonding capacity to be able to issue council bonds, which are not voter approved initiatives.
Okay.
So yes, there is within that. My point is that, again, this is 20 mils is a recommendation to
Correct.
council. They may choose a lower amount, at which point we may not have sufficient bonding capacity. So therefore, we may just want to draw attention to the fact that, hey, a facilities bond may be appropriate in the future.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And I saw Brooke concede. She's like, all right, we can call attention. Okay, Kimberly.
Through the chair, I just want to be pedantic for a moment and just clarify. So we're not recommending earmarking anything, just because that was kind of what we were talking about, the special purpose millage thing, and we kind of moved away from that. I just wanted to clarify that. I just had to call you out on that.
Okay.
All right, focus, we're focusing.
Okay. So I think, David, you're the only one I don't have a sense of. Do you disagree with this? The idea of calling attention to the fact that in the future, a facilities bond may be needed. Oh, I think it's you and Kyle. You're just the only one, I think, that didn't say they agreed with it that I haven't heard from. So I just thought you might want to weigh in, such that maybe it gets refined, such that you do agree with it. I don't know where you stand on
I
it.
agree with Kyle that if we're asking for an increase to
Does anybody change their opinion? All right, yeah, Dale, did you have something? Okay. All right. It does seem that the vast majority of you, everybody but Kyle and David, are comfortable with including this. I suspect the devil will be in the details in terms of how it's written. And so just to reiterate, it's about calling attention to, not recommending. So, okay, good. Yes, Alvita, did you want to add something?
Through the chair, one of the reasons I do support this language in the writer is because of the public vote. I think that's really important.
The public vote for a ballot proposal. Good. And you think it would be important that it be a ballot proposal? Mm-hmm. Good. Okay.
An additional bond would have to be a ballot proposal.
Well, just to be clear, what Joe said is a bond would not have to be a ballot proposal.
But this bond would have to be a ballot proposal. So this bond, this could be a council resolution bonding within our capacity. That one would have to be, that would be additional on top of this. And that would have to be a ballot proposal.
That's correct. Yes, good. Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Any other riders that we need to discuss? Yeah.
I'm not sure who wrote set 3, or if maybe it was a consolidation of a few sets, but the section about development and policy incentives. The incentives committee at the city already gets a lot of the information that's asked for in here. And I wonder if, I mean, it's public, it's foiable, it's just not necessarily promoted, right? So I wonder if as part of an annual report on efficiencies, if some of this, sorry, it's getting late, tax incentive information would make sense in the same context. Like when you're on the incentives committee, you get a spreadsheet. It has a lot of, exactly these specific things that are asked about any potential development. So the city already has this information. And if you ask for it, you can get it, but it's not promoted. And perhaps an annual report would be an appropriate place to report it. But I'm not sure whose item this was and how strongly they feel about it. So just not knowing if anyone else ever sat on the incentives committee, I thought I'd point out that they pretty much have all this info.
Thank you. I think it was Joe's language, and I think he was trying to summarize what he thought he, yes. Right. Does anybody disagree with including that in the annual report? Right. Yes, please, Kimberly.
It sounds like we don't need to if we already have it.
It would be a question of transparency and whether or not we would like to make the information more readily and publicly available. So right now, if someone thinks to ask for something and asks for it, it would be provided. If you didn't know something got an incentive, or if you didn't know exactly the address, this way it would just flip the script and it would have the city share it out more proactively, I guess.
David, did you have something?
I was just going to say that the only issue and is that it's, we say, oh, the community that was, or the apartments built over there, and why aren't we collecting so much property tax revenue from that? It came as a surprise to a lot of folks. It came as a surprise to me that the city would pay $3 million to a building, a developer that potentially would have built those homes anyway, type thing. But that's just my opinion.
The things that were reimbursed under state reimbursement, sort of statute, are typically classified as public improvements. So better sidewalks, stormwater runoff,
I'm just saying it came as a surprise to me. That's all.
remediation of contaminants,
Right.
right? So
Fair point. And not everybody, to your point, not everybody's aware this is happening.
yeah,
Right.
so
Great
it's on
point.
a council agenda, but you might not understand what you're seeing. But if we're now publishing an annual report, if we feel strongly about it, perhaps that's included.
Thank you, Kate. Anybody object to including that in the annual report? Okay. Yes, Alvita, please.
Chair, I have a clarification for myself. So this development language sounds a little bit like a community development ordinance. Do we have that?
We don't have a community development ordinance per se, but we have various objectives around development and policies, but it's not wrapped up in an ordinance.
Council typically sets those objectives, but it's not what you're thinking of, like Detroit's publicly adopted ordinance.
Above and beyond.
Any other riders we need to discuss? Yes, Kimberly.
Can I get back to the income tax real quick? I just have one other thing to add that Kate just reminded me of. So one other thing, I know this got brought up very, very briefly last week when we were touching on, because Joe presented us some information on what a city income tax could look like, and it might be helpful as, if the city does end up investigating this and researching it, it would be helpful if they explained why. Like, they don't have to go into a ton of detail about, but like why Detroit is different, because we learned that there are, state caps on the income tax, and Detroit's are higher than those. So it might just be, just because they're the next city over, it would be helpful, I think, so that people understand, like, I imagine that would be a question on a lot of people's minds is, why is Detroit doing it differently?
Excellent. Maybe they'll have some resident committee members who can help them with that. Other riders? Okay. I'm proud of you. Very good work tonight. All right, we're going to talk about next steps. So Quinn has already volunteered to work on the report. I think she's already actually started working on the report. I recognize, I'm just going to name it out loud in case this is on your mind, that she was a dissenting vote. So it may make sense for somebody in the majority to support that work. Kimberly, I understand she has asked you to write the letters for council and for residents. So the question to you is, how would you like to be involved in the drafting of the report? We certainly don't want, well, first of all, I'm not sure we're allowed to have more than 3 or 4. Like, it can't be a quorum of people working on this. 4 is the cap. So 4 is the cap, so we cannot all work on the report. And we need to know who would like to or who would be willing to work on the report. And I say that, but all of you will have the opportunity to review the report and weigh in before it is finalized. So just because you aren't helping to make the sausage does not mean you don't get to benefit from the fruits of the labor. So who would like to support the drafting of the report? Brooke? Good. Anyone else? Brooke's gonna have lots of free time until your daughter finds out how much free time you have. Okay, anybody else? All right, great. So Brooke and Quinn and Kimberly will work on the report together. Yes, did you have something, David? Okay. All right, so they will work on the report together. It sounds like the goal will be to get you a draft by February 5th or sooner. So you will have a draft. They will send it, Joe and Kara, they will plan to send it to you all as well on that same date. So be aware that, you know, we're all, the words are hard and there's technicalities, and sometimes we need attorneys or assessors or whomever to help us get the words right. So when you receive it, it may not, and I don't say this to point any fingers, it may not all be factually correct. We will have people doing that fact checking at the same time that you are reviewing the report. So I just offer that to you so you don't see something and then think, oh, that's not how I understood it to be. So just understand that those things are happening in parallel because of the short timeline. We will reconvene on the 15th. We will need to have your feedback, and we'll give you a deadline once we send it out before that meeting, because the purpose of the meeting on the 15th will be for anything we need to discuss as a group. So there may be points in the report where somebody thought when we agreed to the idea of public disclosure, we were going to write it this way, and then it was written this way, and we disagree about what it should say. That's the purpose of that meeting, not to wordsmith, not to like go through the report line by line, but to have discussion around the topics we disagree on. So our hope and desire and expectation is that on February 15th, we will all be comfortable with the contents of the report, or if there are a few refinements, that very shortly thereafter, we will all be comfortable with the contents of the report. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions about the next steps or concerns? All right, and look at that. We are only 18 minutes over.
All right. And Joe, I believe you said that that council meeting where council will receive our report is scheduled for March 11th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So all of you that I told that I thought that it was going to be on the 18th, I was wrong. Please adjust your calendar invites. March 11th.
And on the 15th, we can talk about who would like to speak at that meeting, because you will need to present your recommendation.
Yeah. So if you are able to attend, that would be wonderful. So we'll go from there. Anything else before we get to public comment? Okay. So with that, I am going to open public comment. We have a couple members of the public here today with us. So you are welcome to make a comment. You are not required to do so. And then we do have ask you to adhere to a time limit of 3 minutes for your comments. And then as you make your comment, if you could go up to the podium just so that everybody can hear you. And then I believe it's common as you start your comment to state your name and where you live.
Hi there, Tom Gagne, Ferndale, Michigan, on 360 West Woodland. First, I want to applaud what you guys are doing. Thank you very much. Big thumbs up. Quinn, I agree with you. If we go for the whole 20, a lot of voters might freak out at that. And if you ask for the whole thing and you don't get anything, that'll be worse than asking for something that is a little different. I like the idea of having some budget. I would say either cutting or other ways of finding revenue. I think that's a great idea. If you're already doing it, reporting on it, let us all hear. Would be fantastic. Also, on the subject of what we call it, regionalism, I just want to share you guys something. I think I can get through this in 2 minutes. Little cities, no. The 38 square miles made up by Berkeley, Clawson, Ferndale, Hazel Park, Huntington Woods, Madison Heights, Oak Park, Pleasant Ridge, Royal Oak, and Royal Oak Township pack 10 governments and 9 police and fire departments into an area the size of Livonia. Those 10 municipalities spend, and this is from 2007, there's a Ferndale or a Free Press article. Those 10 municipalities spend more than $9 million combined on salaries and benefits so they can have their own city manager. My apologies, Joe. Township supervisor, clerk, treasurer, fire chief, police chief, and other department directors, according to records obtained by the Free Press. It is theoretical only. If those 10 municipalities became one city, in the areas of Livonia, we would be the 3rd largest city in Michigan. Think about the political sway that comes with that. Think about the fact that smaller cities like Ferndale have to have higher millage rates to support all the overhead of a city government. And when we talk about regionalism and stuff like that, cities that are a little bit larger, like Royal Oak, are not on the top 25 of the highest millage rates in Michigan, like Ferndale is, and like Royal Oak Township is. Just some things to consider when you're thinking about what your recommendation is. And I'll be, as many residents, very alert to what extra money you're asking for on top of the bonds that never expire. They're only ever renewed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I see that there are a couple other members of the audience here. You are welcome. Give it a second if you need to make up your mind. Come on up to the podium, state your name and where you live.
Hi, I'm Corey Fishman. I'm from Marshall Street. So yeah, it's my first time in one of these meetings. I mean, no disrespect in saying this, you all seem like great people, but I do find some of this a little disconcerting. Like, he was saying I'm one of the people that would actually have been until now pretty shocked to see that proposal on the ballot. Like, yeah, I think I kind of have to wonder where the 20, actually correct me if I'm wrong, did you say for 63% of residents it would be $25 a month? Oh, a month? Okay, that's a little different, but okay. That, I have a feeling that like it would be a lot more than that, and taxes here are already extremely high, and you guys are talking about more. Like, we already have pretty incredible services and facilities here, it seems like. Like, our waste management is incredible. Our parks have, like, jungle gyms, a skate park, soccer fields, basketball courts. I'm not really sure what more we could really want. And honestly, this place is safer than anywhere I've ever seen. Like, nothing ever gets stolen off of my porch. I will leave my cars unlocked in the street and nothing will ever happen to them. And yeah, like I said, my taxes are already incredibly high, and I think given what you guys are talking about, a 4 mil increase, that would amount to like $400 a month, or not a month, sorry, a year, which to me, like, maybe if my taxes were lower or something, I wouldn't see that as much. But for me, it's already adding even more onto a very large amount. And I see it as somewhat untenable going into the future. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Also, what are the requirements for becoming a part of this committee?
Gotcha, City Manager.
Also, sorry for staring at you the whole time. You were just like, for some reason, the focal point to me.
This was a special assignment committee to study this specific task, this issue. And so it's a task force. So it's
Okay.
it's a one-time committee. There were calls for applications, and it was appointed in July.
Okay.
Great, thank you. I will give one more moment. Come on up.
Hi, Tiffany Gagne, 360 West Woodland, 27-year resident. I walked in late, and I'm sorry. I just picked up on a couple of sentences and buzzwords that kind of caught my attention, and I don't know all your names, and I apologize, but the gal with the long, dark ponytail had indicated that this was a chance to do a lot with one simple thing. This is not a simple thing. This is asking people to, some people, a lot of people, to squeeze blood out of a rock. If you have a simple thing that you need to do, then please put it on paper and give me circles and arrows and tell me what it is. Break it down, keep it simple, like Dale said. Keep it simple, tell me what the simple thing is, and then ask for that. Don't just ask for money. We've been here 27 years. We've been through some of this before. Please don't do it again. I heard we're supposed to educate our community. I'm not exactly sure what we're teaching them. We've got a lot of people who've lived here for many, many, many years, and they don't have Wi-Fi, they don't attend council meetings. Cable is too expensive. A lot of people don't even have Comcast. Not exactly sure who our target audience is when it comes to all of this. And there was also a suggestion that we should put something out on the internet or some sort of public forum about what's going to happen to your taxes when you move here. Let me tell you what happens to your taxes when you move here. I'm sure you know, right? Yeah. We moved here 27 years ago. I am stunned at what our taxes are right now. Stunned. I don't even want to tell you. And let's see. Oh, senior center. My mother's a senior citizen, and she lives here in Ferndale. She's 82 years old. She's gone to one senior function. We are going to spend how much money on a senior facility for what percentage of our population? We're sharing with Hazel Park right now. What's wrong with that? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And we're incorporating another community within our group. Please don't spend millions of dollars for a senior center. We can make do. Seniors have made do for decades. We don't need to spend a bunch of money on that. And trust me, I love my seniors here in Ferndale. I thank you for your time, and I reiterate what my husband said. Thank you all so much for the time that you put into this. You go deeper than we all know, and very much appreciated.
Great, thank you. All right, one more moment to see if anybody is interested. All right, seeing none then, I am going to close public comment, and I will take a motion then to adjourn. Moved by Kate. Seconded by Kimberly. All in favor? All right, motion carries. Thank you all so much.